So we're going to work on the chorizo buttercream cake now. So before we start the actual icing and decorating of the cake, we need to make the chorizo pieces. Now I make them with chocolate, and you need to make them in multiple different shades and colours. So these are the pieces here that we will be using, and I'll show you how to make these pieces. You always want a range of lighter colours, your main colour that you want to use, which we're going to use a dusty pink, and then a dark colour as well. So first off, we melt some white chocolate. And we get all the lumps out, and then we're going to separate these into a couple of bowls. Now, to make it easier on cleanup, we're going to make 7 different shades, but we're not going to use 7 different bowls. We also want to try and get the tones of the colours correct as well, so reusing the same bowls will also help to get the same shades happening. First off, we're going to make this white chocolate a little bit whiter, because our first colour that we're going to use is going to be white. We're using a Colour Mill colours. They've got an amazing range of different colours to use. We're using the white, latte, dusty pink, and black. These are oil-based colours. So they're perfect for colouring chocolate and perfect for buttercream. Anything that's oil-based. So we're just mixing in the white just to take that yellow tinge off the white chocolate. We've got a slip mat laying down onto a board, just so it's easier to move around. And we're just going to pour a small amount of the white chocolate onto our slip mat. We're going to use our palette knife and just smooth it out lightly. You don't want this to be too thick, you also don't want it to be too thin, and it doesn't have to be perfect because we're going to chop this up into pieces. And that's your white done. Next colour we're going to make is going to be the latte colour. So we're going to pour that into one of our spare bowls sitting here. We're going to put in a smaller shake first to make sure everything's mixed together. We're going to put in a small amount. Always start with a small amount because you can always add from there. This we want quite a pale colour anyway. Just a little bit more. And that's nicely mixed through, and we're just going to pour a small amount of that onto our slip mat. Now we're going to use more of the lighter colours on our chorizo cake than the darker colours. We're then using, with the leftover of the latte colour, we're going to add the dusty pink to that. And again, just a small amount to start off with. Stir that in. We will add a little bit of extra white because we are going to make 3 shades of this dusty pink. So start with a pale version. Smooth that out. Add a bit more to make a darker version. Remember, in the dark colours we don't need a lot of, so we'll just put a small amount of that on here. And then what we'll do is a colour in between the two. So just a little bit more of the white. And pour that on. Okay, that's one bowl down. Smooth that out. And we can set those colours aside to set. So another option for your chorizo chocolate, if you do not have a slip mat, you can just use a piece of baking paper. Remember to pop it onto a board so it's easy to move around, so you don't stuck with things all over your bench. The next two colours we're going to do are going to be our grey and our black. Remember, we don't need a lot of these colours. So we've got a small amount of chocolate, white chocolate left that's melted. We're going to mix in our black, just a tiny bit. So what we're trying to make here is a grey colour. Sort of looking like a natural concrete colour. That's all we need. And we're going to pour half of that onto our baking paper. Doesn't matter if the colour's not all the way mixed through. Remember, we're trying to make natural stone effects here. And in nature, not everything is perfect. Spread it out nice and thin. And then we're going to use what's left. We're going to make a darker black as well. And you don't want a really, really heavy black. If you do want a heavy black, you can always use dark chocolate as well for this. It actually colours it quicker for you, so you're not using so much colouring. I'm more going for a deep grey colour. And that's all nicely mixed, and we're just going to pour that onto our sheet. Again, doesn't have to be perfectly mixed in. And we're going to smooth that out. The great thing about colouring chocolate is if you don't use it, you can either store it or just remelt it and use it for something else later. So you really want to make more than you actually need for this, because you can't run short, because then you'd have to mix more up and you'll have different colour tones. So that's our chocolate ready for our chorizo buttercream. So now we've made our chocolate pieces in all our different shades and colours. We now need to get it into our chorizo chips. So to do that, all we're going to do is just use a knife and just chop it randomly up into pieces. Now again, don't think about it being perfect, because we're trying to make a natural element. And it needs to have all your little sharp corners and different shapes and textures to it. Now, I do try to keep the colours separate. It doesn't really matter too much, but it just gives it easier when you're trying to match the colours onto the cake. You've got them sitting separately on your plates. So remembering, chop it in all different directions, and you're aiming for a range of different size pieces, anything from a bigger size piece to a littler size pieces, and you can break them up. When we do put them onto the cake, we can break them up smaller if we need to. And you continue through until you've got all your colours chopped up and ready to use. And there you have all your chorizo chocolate bits ready for your chorizo cake. So we're going to make our chorizo buttercream cake now. We've got a cold cake out of the freezer, which has just had its crumb coating done. The base colour that you want to use in this doesn't really matter because we are actually going to fill in the gaps with another colour over the top. So I'm just using a white buttercream just because it's easier. I'm going to quickly ice this up. Doesn't have to be perfect because we're going to be sticking a lot of chocolate pieces onto it and cleaning and polishing it up later. That's all we have to do, just so it's squared off, nice and straight, and then we're going to start adding our chorizo pieces to it. So we're going to start with the lightest colour and your main colour. So our main colour is the pink. So we're going to start with the lightest pink first, work our way to the darkest pink, add our paler colours, and then add our blacks and greys to it. So we're just going to place these pieces randomly onto the cake, making sure they're firmly on there. If you find pieces are a bit too big, you can just break them up as you go along. And there's our basic buttercream chorizo design. We're going to put that into the freezer, set that up nice and hard so the chocolate pieces stay in place, and then we're going to grout in with some more coloured buttercream to actually make this really stand out and polish it up to finish it off. So back to the chorizo buttercream. We have now made this nice and firm into the freezer, so all of the chocolate bits are nice and stuck on firm. So now what we're going to do is grout it. Just like if you were tiling the bathroom, you need to now fill in all the gaps. So we're going to use a couple of different tools for that. We've got a couple of different types of palette knives because we need to get right into those gaps so there's no air bubbles. So I'm going to start with the smaller one, and I'm just going to work it back and forwards, up and down, over the chocolate pieces. Not putting too much on, but enough to fill in those gaps. And I'm going to do that the whole way around the cake. Again, don't have to worry about it being perfect because we're actually going to remove a lot of this buttercream and then polish up the cake. Okay, grouting done. Okay, so I'm just boiled the kettle, let it sit for a bit just to have some warm water to help us remove some of that buttercream. Now I do know there is a rule that you don't mix chocolate and water. We're not really mixing the water into the chocolate here, so it's not going to have any effect on the chocolate at all. Just using some gloves just to protect my hands and some paper towel. We're just slowly going to take back some of that buttercream and make it a bit smoother. And what we're doing here is just removing those little bit of buttercreams that's sitting on top of the stone, or the chocolate pieces, which are going to become the stone pieces. And just smoothing it out. The heat from the water is just making that buttercream just that little bit smoother as well, which is why we weren't too worried about how it was put in by the palette knife or put over by the palette knife, because now we're just making all those little gaps, filling them all in. Now this is exactly what you do when you actually tile a bathroom wall. Put the grout in and then you just remove it with a soft cloth. We're doing exactly the same thing, but a bit more food safe. And so that's our Terrazzo buttercream, all nicely polished and finished off, and you can add any decorations you like to that now.